So what we're going to try and do here is I'm going to make 3 points. The first one is really a more general piece of advice that I think will go well, whether you're an architect, a facilities planner, a teacher, a mum or dad, whether you're a young person trying to work out where your voice can insert itself into all these debates. And then the other 2 things are hopefully good stimuli for some discussion afterwards. I'm going to share my screen as well, but I promise not to talk too much for too often on them. I'm going to share some slides with you, but let me take you first of all to my first piece of advice, which is dead simple. Listen. I think that listening is massively underrated at the moment. There's a lot of telling people what to do. There are so many pieces of advice at the moment that it's kind of like every day is a self-help that you didn't ask for. And so the thing that we can all do best in our communities is really, really listen. Now, in space design, I'm aware that I've been invited here by an architectural firm. I'm aware that there are lots of very architectural looking people in the audience, and I can tell because you're all wearing the same shirt. And then you've got educators in the audience as well. You've got some students in there. We've got some people who are dual hats, being mum or dad and being an educator. Maybe they're working in physical space design. But you know what? One of the weakest areas for really listening in education over the past 15, 20 years has been in space design. It's arguably the biggest expense, $1 trillion in the US alone spent on learning environments by the last count as a kind of annualized budget. It's a big budget to spend on school buildings that we're maybe not even using at the moment. But the amount of listening that we really do when we're designing a building is not as much as it could be. When you're in this time of trying to work out what you're going to do with your physical facilities and your digital facilities and the mix and the match between them, what you're going to do about home learning. It's really interesting seeing the furniture companies at the moment sending a lot of email shots about how you can establish a better home learning environment with furnishings and interior design. You've got 3 different kinds of environment at the very least that you're trying to think about. The one thing you got to do is not think that you've got the answer, but just listen, let people have their say. And when you're thinking about the type of learning that you want to create in the future, don't sit and design it with experts exclusively, listen. And so we've done this in our firm every time we work with a school. We're really proud of the way that we help schools listen. And one of the best examples of listening in a community was about 18 months ago now in the American School of Paris. What we encouraged them to do is create a project nest or a war room. I find war room is a kind of hard phrase if you're dealing with kindergartners, but project is normally a physical place where you put all the listenings. It's a nest. So like cuckoos, you bring all the stories you're stealing from around your community back to one place so you can see them together. And you can do this digitally using something like Mural or Trello or Padlet, but you bring all those stories together in one place. So it's important to have your nest. And then the second thing you need is a design team. I think we've got a design team right here. A design team is really a team with great social reach through your community. And that's where, it's not just about expertise. So it's not about being an amazing leader, educator, architect, designer. It's about having reach into the community. So this design team in Paris had an amazing social network, if you like, and they were able to go and talk and listen to so many different people, a real cross-section across the community. So we asked this design team of about 20 or 25 people to go and interview in depth at least 10 people about their what worked in their school, where the challenges were, and ideas about what could drive the school to a different future. And what they gathered helped inform their vision and their new strategy. And so what you're doing at the moment in every educational setting around the planet all together, and it's the first time we've ever done that, every school on the planet thinking about its future afresh, the first thing to do is find your design team, that social network that can go out and listen to your community so that you don't end up with the bias of listening to what everyone else is doing and hoarding other people's ideas. A bit like the poor architect who merely copies the school they did last time and replicates it in the next space. The poor strategist is one who just, I call it educational tourism, who just goes and cherry picks what they want, normally from Denmark and maybe from Singapore, and then they bring it to their school, wherever it is. No, no, no. Listen to your community and find out where the needs and where the vision is there. And here are some events that you can use. Most of these events, of course, in the last couple of months have been eradicated from the diaries of schools because you couldn't have them face to face. So professional learning events largely have evaporated. It's time to get them back in the diary. I would say that teachers need to learn from each other, and students have so much to share in those professional learning settings too, because they've been their own teachers, and mums and dads too could contribute to that. What learning have we really enjoyed at home? Asking students what's worked for them in this period is fascinating. Kids have had time to dive deep into things they struggled with before. So my 9-year-old's becoming an expert in maths, where before she thought she wasn't very good at maths, because she's got time to dive deep. So could you involve young people and their parents in some professional learning reflection sessions over the next few weeks to really understand the best of this tricky period? And then what about your local staff? A lot of this works for both international schools, but it also works for schools in pretty much every community in the world. You have non-teaching staff who have maybe lost their jobs or been furloughed, or they've been there keeping the buildings ticking over, getting them ready for a return to school. They may speak languages other than English or other than the principal language of the country you're in. So how can you engage them on their terms and their language? Think about running events. So I ran local language events. I do them in French and German. Have you got people in your team who could run it in Spanish and in whatever the local language is? Could you use your students to run some listening events in their languages to tap deep into communities? Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, particularly if you're trying to engage with parents, I've discovered. The best thing about running parent breakfasts in this current kind of more online environment is that the budget is zero. They buy their own breakfast. So have a parent breakfast as often as you can. Invite mums and dads along at the beginning of their day while they're fresh, and get them to talk about the experience of being a home educator. What have they enjoyed from it? What's been challenging from it? What would they like to see in the future? And taking time to do that, reaching out to business. So in a previous time, you might have held an evening event with nice dresses and suits and tuxies, and you have a business event to define the future of education with business people. What does business need? What potential interesting avenues and learner pathways might there be in the future? You can do that online. In fact, it's better because you can do that. You can record it and keep it for posterity. But what new vision might your school create by looking at where its young people go in the future? You could invite parents to experience online learning for themselves. So what does an asynchronous or a synchronous online session feel like? What does that feel like when it's blended? That mix of both being in a school with a smaller class and being at home. So rather than just thinking that we have to snap to crises and get students into school, I would be looking at how you can give parents an experience to help them understand what school is going to be like for the next probably 18 months as we figure out how to deal with the scenario that we're in at the moment. And finally, lots of coffee and conversation. Ideally, you would do this in a physical project nest, but I would encourage every leader, every student council lead, every teacher who's maybe an aspiring leader to do this, to get yourself in front of as many people as possible, listen to their stories and capture the important parts so that you can bring that together and come up with a synthesis of that sums up what your community is saying is a great direction for the future. So in transition design, you're not trying to transition back to what you had before. You're trying to transition by building on the best of what you have today. The first question is really, what is the best that you've had going on? And once you've got an understanding of the best ideas, you can start to design. Design means that you are doing something with an intent. that you test your assumptions behind that intent, and then you look at the reality and whether you're managing to design a genuine solution to a real problem. Now, most of the time, people have no problem designing great stuff, but they design great stuff for the wrong problem. And a case in point is this. This is Tuesday in France. A tweet from a teacher shared these 3 pictures, and he summed up the feeling of the educators facilitating this kind of environment. He wasn't sure it was a great idea to have kids come back to school if this is what we've got. When I shared this, I had principals and teachers, and I had students from schools all across Europe and in Asia, where schools have been going back slowly, saying that they feel this is one of the worst times in their professional lives because this is not what they signed up for. It's not what, and also it's not what parents really want their children to have. The kids were having a better time at home and they were having better learning. We actually risk seeing a back step where teachers feel that to catch up, they need to transmit as much learning as possible to children. And because the activities that they know are better, the collaborative activities, the dialogic activities where students talk to each other, because that's harder, or actually it's just noisier when you're sat 2 meters apart from people, they don't do it. And so there's also been this uptick in 1950s style teaching rather than 2020 style learning. The learning that students were having at home, however disruptive it was for mum and dad trying to get on with their day, was arguably better than the experience and the learning that you're seeing here. Is this what you're going to design when you head into school? It's not the best of learning, it's the worst. It's the best of prison, but it's the worst of learning. So what can we do to design with intent? First thing is know the problem you're trying to solve, and don't let politicians define that problem for you. Design the problem with your community, and then design the best solution you can to that problem and look at any unintended consequences of having done it. And that will hopefully be a little bit of a provocation for the discussion. You can choose in your breakout room whether you want to talk about this, the idea of the problem with the new normal. The problem with the new normal is it's not new, it's 1950s as far as I can see. So what's the problem with the new normal? And how can we reframe that argument away from political diktat telling us that kids have to sit 2 meters apart to instead design something ingenious that allows learning to happen in spite of having to sit a little bit further apart than normal. So design, that was my second point. And my third and final point before we break out is this: be a radiator. In life, there are radiators and there are drains. And no one wittingly stands under a drain or a gutter. You tend to get rained upon if you do that. It's rather miserable and damp, particularly if you live in Scotland. Whereas on a cold day, you stand next to the radiator, don't you? You're up against the radiator and you feel the warmth coming up your back. And the one thing about doing that is other people tend to join you because they're cold too. And we've got a choice at the moment. We can stand next to radiators and we can generate ideas that are going to fuel the kind of education, the kind of learning that we want to see for years to come. And we can create that right now, or we can get sucked down the drain. Now, being a radiator means that we've got to take the best things from this crisis. We've got to be the optimist that sees the best in it, who doesn't lament the worst. And we've got to work out what we can replace in the future with the best. What wasn't working before that could be even better now? When we're designing school buildings for 1,000 students, maybe we'll only have 600 students in them at any one time. I think that's an amazing opportunity. Think of all the new real estate that you create in your school that allows you to do more outdoor learning than you've ever imagined before, that allows you to take advantage of bigger spaces to do louder learning instead of thinking that it has to be quiet and meditative. So if you are thinking about that as a discussion for your breakout, what might help you is think about needs that people have, or you could change your discussion and talk about the impact on the learner experience or the learner outcome, or you could think about what people say they want, which could be mums and dads or politicians saying that they want a certain thing. It could be students saying, we want this, give us it. And then look at the cost of doing it. And the challenge for your discussion is, what are the things that cost the least, but have the maximum potential to fulfill the needs, the desires that people have, and also have a really positive impact on students' learning experience? So that, if you're willing to accept it, is a way of trying to frame two potential discussions that you could have in your breakout rooms. Of course, it's down to you. You can decide what you want to talk about in the small team that you'll be in your room. But I hope that I've provoked. I hope I've been a bit of an optimist as well. I think we should settle for nothing but the best, even when we are in challenging times. Crisis learning is short term. It can't be for the long term. So how do we move from crisis learning into the next thing? Maybe that's the question I would love you all to try and answer, and we can help each other out by providing those answers afterwards.